When I think back on all the fears when I was pregnant, all of them dismissed except for one. The only test the state mandated was genetic. Looking for that extra chromosome.
Hello and welcome to the If We Knew Then podcast. I'm Steven Sachs,
And I'm Lori Sachs.
and today we have a return guest, Nick Novicki from the Disability Film Challenge. We had such a great first episode with him. We want to get a little more personal take, and so we thought we'd have him on again.
This episode is filled with a lot of gems that I've taken to incorporate to make my journey a little bit, more peaceful, more beautiful, and so I can learn and grow from some of the challenges. And we're so fortunate to have him back.
Here's Nick. Nick, what a pleasure it is to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me again.
I was hoping to get a little more personal with you this time around. We had talked about inclusion, and that's kind of a big part of our podcast and a part of the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge it's inclusion. How has the lack of that inclusion affected your life?
I've grown up as a little person. Oddly enough, though, they didn't know I was a little person until I was 2 because my kind of dwarfism, it's not detectable until you're 2 years old. So they didn't really know I was a little person. But ultimately, I've grown up just being like, this is my world. I'm a little person, and I'm going to do everything. I'm going to play Little League. I'm going to, go to recess. And some of that time I spent in a electric scooter. I had a very difficult time walking. I was certainly the smallest kid in the history of everywhere I went. But I didn't let that stop me from living my life because this is all I've known. So I think it's important for people with disabilities to just get out there, and be out in the world. And I know sometimes it's easier said than done. There are certain places that are not fully accessible, and that's a challenge. I grew up before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. The Americans with Disabilities Act just celebrated its 30th anniversary. It was passed in 1990, and it's really great legislation that has helped little people live a more fully inclusive life. But when I grew up, I just did everything the best I knew and had as much fun. And my family was supportive, my friends were. And I think a lot of times, not just for people with disabilities, it's up to ourselves to have an outlook to say, hey, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to have fun the way I want to have fun. And I'm going to do everything, and I'm going to do it on my terms. And that's not just the disability community. That's everybody in the world that's underrepresented. I highly encourage people to have that mindset. And I know sometimes it's easier said than done. And there's ups, there's downs. I haven't always been, optimistic 100% of the time. I went through junior high, which is a challenging time for me. Nobody's perfect. Everyone, even though we see Instagram and everybody looks perfect, nobody's perfect. Everybody has their own issues, things they overcome, things they want that they don't have. So I think ultimately it's a mindset.
Well, do you think that your mindset led to how people around you accepted you? Because I think of inclusion, not only physical inclusion like the ADA, like actual being able to get into a building, being able to use the restroom to help you do things in a physical environment. How were you accepted in your life just in socially with people?
I was always accepted. Honestly, I never really got bullied. People would say things, but I've always learned how to be funny. And I think I've always been good at speaking. And so generally, you don't want to attack somebody who's kind of good with words because I fire back. So I, as a mechanism, always learned comedy and always learned how to break the ice. And I think that that's something that that I learned as being the only little person naturally. And I think that was probably a combination of my family and my brothers being funny, and my family being supportive, and my school being supportive. And they were always there to provide stools, to lower lights, to do things. But also, I would say my parents, something that was great about them is my mom was always like, "Look, if you want to wash your hands, you got to go get a stool, or you should climb and figure out how to get this out of the cabinet." So she kind of helped push me off the um, area where I needed to be fully reliant on them. So she did a good job in making sure I stayed as independent as I could, but also making sure the school was kind of there to do other things that I needed help with.
So you've come to Liam's school and you've spoken to the students for a couple years. And one thing that you do talk about, you tell stories about your mom and her advocacy. And I think this is a really great time for you to tell that story, because the parents who are listening, the people who are listening, they're all advocates, right? So now from your point of view, can you just share with us a little bit about your mom's advocacy?
Yeah, so my mom, as I said, was very supportive, and she really kind of let me live my life on my own terms. But she was also very supportive with the school. And actually, my first day of school, she actually came to school with me, and she passed out pamphlets to all the kids. She's like, "Here you go, here you go, here you go. This is my son. He's a little person. Read the pamphlets." And so she was very supportive, but was there to kind of help break the ice with me my first day of school. And not everybody had that. And, I may not have needed that, but it also made me feel confident. And we passed a book out of to all the kids of what being a little person is. And so that was pretty cool. And ultimately, I think that kids, once they're able to ask their question or find out their answer. "You're little? Why are you little?" "Oh, you're just little." "Okay." And then they're moving on to like, "Well, what's your favorite color?" So I think kids' attention, or, the bullying, sometimes it's a lot of it is they just don't understand, and they're kind of afraid by their lack of knowledge. But then once they get that knowledge, or they understand the situation, then they're like, "Oh, he's just a normal kid." So I think that that's an interesting dynamic. And now, through the film challenge, as I said, we have hundreds of films that are created. I really have developed a friendship with not a friendship or an acquaintance, or just gotten to know so many of the families of film challenge participants, that sometimes, like you, and your son has Down syndrome, and I've gotten to know you guys through the process. And it's not just you. I mean, there's countless film challenge participants that I've really gotten to know and see firsthand how they interact. And also, it's just interesting to see how kids interact with other kids, and seeing kids with disabilities at screenings. How does the public interact with them? And so that's always something interesting to me. And my wife's a little person. I'm a little person. I've been going to little people conventions my whole life. So my exposure to the disability community started with just little people, and then through the film challenge, that net widened in a big way. But I love giving back and working with kids and talking with kids. I go to little people conventions. I coach kids basketball games, and I feel like I'm like Pat Riley out there. I get really intense, and I'm like, "Come on, we gotta win." I'm that, but I love that. And it's interesting. And I think even something else, knowing you and knowing Liam, this is a story that was actually very interesting. A friend of a friend, I heard them talking about this experience, and they know because of my film challenge and how much I'm embedded into the disability community. They were saying that their son, who was a little kid, I think he was about 4 years old or 5 years old, somewhere around there. he was in school, and he goes to this school, and I think it's like nursery school or daycare, with another boy with Down syndrome. And he was saying, oh, well, I don't like this boy because he bites me, and he does this or that, and you're not supposed to do that, so he's a bad kid. And it was interesting because this friend of a friend was saying, no, that's he's not a bad, and kind of had the first conversation that not everybody is the same, and that they just do things in a different way. And this is not, the whole concept of what's good, what's bad. Is this a bad boy? No, he's not a bad boy. He's done things differently. That's how he does. And so I think that's interesting.
That leads a little bit into, you said when you go to the screenings in the Disability Film Challenge, you see how the public responds or reacts to disability. What do you see?
Well, the cool thing about the film challenge is we screen all over the country and all over the world. And so I think in Los Angeles, we're exposed to many more, you're going to see more people with disabilities, or more just representation in general in bigger cities, because there's just more people. But when you go to smaller towns, sometimes they're just not used to seeing a little person necessarily. So I've seen it from my own point of view, where people are staring, or laughing or joking or have comments about me. But I definitely, and I don't care. I'm 38 years old. I'm comfortable who I am. Nothing has ever really bothered me, and luckily that's always been the way I've been. Um, but it's interesting to see this happened to some film challenge participants, some with physical disabilities, some with cognitive. Um, Sometimes people won't know that somebody has a disability, because certain disabilities are more visible than others. So it's interesting to see people interact at a movie theater and stare, or ask a question, or maybe say a comment that's inappropriate. And I am an optimist at heart. So I generally feel that a lot of times people don't do this because they're truly bad people. They just don't understand, or they're just not exposed to it. So again, this is why it's so important to have content that people could see, that they could resonate with. For Game of Thrones to be there, and to have somebody see Peter Dinklage in a three-dimensional role be the boss and the leader, it kind of changes the way you think of little people when you see them. And I think the same thing for other people with disabilities. When people see them on screen, it really changes their perception of that disability, and destigmatizes disability as a whole. And I'm honored that through the film challenge that has happened. I think the biggest way that's happened has been through the awareness campaign, when all filmmakers are sharing their films at the same time, and through their social channels, and asking their friends and families to do it, and getting on the local news, and it's reaching millions of people. And so then they're going, I started watching that film, and I didn't know that about your son, or that was really cool about your daughter, or, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. So, and I think the other thing is, when we're going to these cities and we're doing these screenings, we're exposing people to disability, which is important. We're just there. When you're there, when you're part of society, then you're not worried about it. But it's when you're seeing things from afar, then you have a certain perception of what disability is.
Well, you use that word exposure, and that's just what the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge does, and that's what's needed. It's the lock that opens the door to inclusion. I was thinking of some past episodes we've had of Sadr Issa and his dad who has Down syndrome. I think of Chris Nickick, who is a gentleman with Down syndrome who ran a half Ironman. He's actually attempting a full Ironman in November. And those things open up. In fact, in that episode, I talked about once someone broke the 4-minute mile, it then just happened. It became almost commonplace, where it would happen multiple times. The first person to, Sir Edmund Hillary getting to Everest, and then it opens the floodgates, right? So what in your life, or who in your life did you see that was that exposure, and that you saw, that you said, wow, I see this, and now maybe I can do it. Especially, I think of you get into the entertainment industry. Who did you see? Who were you exposed to?
I think part of it was I was always kind of good at doing accents and things like that. And I had an English teacher that was like, you're good at doing this kind of stuff. And I was kind of in a funk. This was in junior high. I used to be an athlete and I loved playing sports, and physically I just couldn't play them anymore. And certainly not with people that were double my size and starting to get very kind of aggressive and physical. So she recommended that I try out for the school play. And so I give Miss Fish and my English teacher in junior high, a big credit for giving me a push out there to start with entertainment. And then I saw it was a couple other things. I saw Warwick Davis and Willow as a kid, and I saw myself as like a hero. I saw Danny Woodburn, who is such a great person and activist for people with disabilities. He's a film challenge judge, and he does a lot of amazing work with Ruderman Family Foundation and with all these different organizations. And he's a little person that was acting in Seinfeld, and that was my favorite show. From junior high to through high school, and so getting to see him in my favorite show, and he's a little person, and he's being funny. That was a huge milestone. But a lot of times, if you're a disabled artist out there, or you're a parent of somebody with a disability, and you're thinking about trying to expose your child into the arts, a lot of it is just get out there. It's trial. You got to just jump in the deep end, just dive in and start doing it. People, not even just people with disabilities, but people in general, are always asking me, how do I get into stand-up comedy? And I say, just go and do it. You got to just do it. Personally, that I feel like there's no learning for that. I mean, there certainly is with acting. You could take classes and training, and I'm still training and learning as I go. Same thing with writing and other things in the entertainment industry. But a lot of it is just get up there, and it's learning on the job. And as people with disabilities, know that the industry is looking for you, and just get out there and start trying to act. Do something with your brother, with your sister, with your mom. Make it a YouTube thing. Register for the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge. Just work leads to work, but you got to get out there, and you got to be exposed to the arts and to the world. And I think beyond the entertainment industry, you were talking about that episode that you with the gentleman from Syria, and his dad, is working in a factory. And so it's, there's jobs out there, whatever the job is, whether you have a physical or a cognitive disability, try to get opportunities to work anywhere, because again, work leads to work. And if you're out there and you're, doing a job or doing something that you're passionate about, you'll get better and you'll get more opportunities.
You had said being a part of society, and we are a part of society, but it's not always a welcomed or a given thing. I think because of, historically, and I think we're trying to now change things as a society to change the mindset, but nobody has to give that to you. You don't have to ask for that. You are a part of society. You are a human in this human race. And I think that's so important. And I think it's so amazing what your mom, with her advocating or with her pushing you to that you didn't have a limit. If you want to get that, you go get that. Like, it definitely instilled something in you, which is such a gift. What would you say you learned from watching your mom advocate?
I would say what I learned, and mind you, I'm not a parent, yet. I mean, I think at some point that's kind of something that we, that may happen. But I think also I learned from my mom to give people space, but be there. Be there if you need to be, but also let people figure out things for themselves. But but I'm, it wasn't like I was raised in like a wolf den where she's like, you can find your own blanket. She was definitely like a very supportive and loving and nurturing mom. But I think it's important to go to public school, to be as a part of everything as your child feels comfortable being a part of. Because you want to do everything, I wanted to do everything that everybody else did. And that was me that wanted to do that. So, I think she was just supportive in me kind of doing dumb stuff. I probably shouldn't have ever played basketball. I mean, why? I'm so short. I have so many physical problems, but I was like, I want to do this. I want to play for University of Notre Dame football. And I'm like, the shortest person in like the history of where I'm from. So, I think let everyone live their dreams and do what they want to do, and just be supportive.
Do you have any advice as to what made you to where you're not bothered by inappropriateness? That's the only way I can say it is, what, because I love your spark and your flame, and I love your attitude. I remember when you came to school, and I think a boy asked you, he was kindergarten, so that's what you're saying about kids who just don't know. And I think through obviously inclusion and an inclusive classroom and being exposed, it's not this strange thing to see someone who's different from us. And I remember a boy asked if you were magical, and you just go, "No, I'm not." I forget what your answer was, but I know one kid asked if you were a leprechaun and if you had gold coins, because it sparked this whole thing where one kid asked a question and then they all jumped, and they were not malicious at all. Because I think if it was malicious, it would have been something different. It was just this like, what? He's what? He does. And you handled it with such grace that I was inspired, and I put a little bit of that in my pocket to remember to take pause.
Well, I would say one big piece of advice for people with disabilities, and also for family members of people with disabilities, is you exert way more energy than needed by being upset and being like, I'm going to fight everybody all the time. You can't. It's certain you got to just have a certain mindset where you're like, I'm gonna live my life, and I like who I am, or I'm, and sometimes there are times that are hard, where you're like, there are certain days where I'm like, not today, and that's okay too. No one is just fully perfect all the time, but I would just say to be okay with it, and to brush it off, because it's kind of like now being a 38-year-old guy. When I was in junior high, or high school, I was like, man, I need to get a girl, and I'm not dating, or this is so hard. And I thought that was like the biggest deal in the world. And in the end, you're like, oh, it's not really a big deal, and who cares? And so let these things brush off your shoulder, because you can't put too much weight in it. So it's got to be in the mindset of the person with a disability. Just go, that guy just doesn't understand, or that girl, or especially with kids don't understand yet. It takes kids time to process. And I would say to some extent, to some parents, let kids be kids, and let them ask questions, and don't hide the kid's question or try to shelter your child from experiences. Let them have these experiences where sometimes kids will ask a question in school or say something which your child may not like, but that's life. That's not going to, end when you leave the second grade or third grade or fourth grade. But what can stay is a mindset to say, who cares, or to brush it off, or to have fun with situations. Sometimes, now you have all these things. You can go on YouTube and watch the Dalai Lama talk, or you can see all these different things that weren't there when I was a kid. But what was there is just going, that's okay. Who cares? And so it ends up being a mindset, and life's never perfect, and it's not perfect for everybody, so I think there's a lot of people who are like, if I could only be like Johnny or Jenny or Louise, then everything will be perfect. But there is no perfect. They're going through their own moments, challenges, issues, things they're overcoming in their own life. So just stay the course and believe in that you're good and that you belong everywhere, and that you have just as much of a right to be there and as anyone else, and but also just also try to have a thick skin because you got to in life. And I think that's not just for the disability community, that's for everybody. Not everyone's going to say the things that you want to hear all the time.
That's true. You have to have thick skin. There's times to stand up for yourself, but you can't take everything so personal, and you really do a great job with that. And I saw that firsthand too when we were at school, and you just made it right.
Watch, like, I go to the school and there's like a kindergarten that beats me up, and you're like, he's so good at this, and he's great when he gets and then I just get beat up by like a first grader, and they're like, I told you you're a leprechaun. That's funny, because it's funny, the all these different things, now with these virtual festivals and virtual shows, I'm telling jokes and I don't hear anyone laughing because they're on mute, or they're, now I'm gonna do stand up in cars. People are gonna be in their cars at drive-in theaters, and so you got to get used to even this, where you're telling a joke and no one is responding because literally they can't. They're muted or they're inside, socially distanced. So this is definitely a time that we will remember forever. And I can't thank you guys enough for having me on, and for all the work that you do and the support of the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge, the disability community, and just for you guys being great parents and great people that are really amazing members of society, and that give Liam a chance to live the best, kind of coolest version of the life he wants to live.
Last episode we asked you an if we knew then question about the film festival. Do you have one personally, just something you wish you knew in the past?
I think it's important to fail. It's important to learn by error. So in my own life, I think even as being a little person, it was important for me to get picked on in certain situations. It was important for me to live the life experiences that I lived. If I would say anything, if I wish I knew then now, I guess maybe in junior high, I'd be like, I'd find an amazing wife, and a perfect girl for me, when I was going through a time where I was like, there's no one, it's hard. I can't date. No one likes me, that normal junior high kind of period. I think I would tell myself that I'll work out.
I love your if you knew then, because I honestly, Sophia's in middle school, and middle school is hard.
Yeah.
And if you could go back, I think that's the person we need to talk to, is the person in middle school who's come out of the honeymoon of elementary school where everything is hope, and you get into those changes with all these strangers and everybody's trying to figure it out. And I think that's a good person to talk to say, you know what, you're going to be okay. And we met your wife. I would say she's definitely worth waiting for, right? And if you knew that that's what was coming up, then that would have made it all.
Oh, it all worked out.
I think going back to this, that failures and down moments are important. I think sometimes we're living in this time where we just think everything should be perfect, 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 perfect. And I think you need kind of downswings to make yourself happy, you can't be all leveled at perfect, 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 So as crazy as junior high was, and as much of a down period as it was, I think it's important for me, and I think it's important for everybody to have those awkward, awful kind of moments where you're all like going through puberty, and like people are awkward, and you're not the big fish anymore, you're the small fish, and I think those are important.
Yeah, we were talking to someone about that just not long ago. Actually, it was an episode just talking about grief and that how important that is in your life. You need that, and it's part of joy. It's all goes together.
Absolutely.
Nick, again, a pleasure to have you on the podcast and get to know you a little bit better, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me and for all the amazing work you guys do. on the Film Challenge films and in the disability community.
Oh, thank you. And your attitude and grace at how you handle things are inspiring. And I want to have a little bit more of that. I'm always trying and learning. And I think, it is that constant change in our journey and in our experience. And I learned from you things that, especially just letting things roll off your back, to not have to carry everything, but then to also embrace the challenges. I love that, because there's nothing that's been wasted. And if I can keep that and carry that into my days when I do experience those challenges, I will be better off.
Thank you so much.
Please follow us on Twitter at If We Knew Then Pod, and you can drop us a line on our Facebook page at If We Knew Then Pod, or visit our website, ifweknewthen.com, to send us an email with questions and comments. And you can join our mailing list there and get alerts of future podcast episodes. All these links will be added to this episode's show notes. Thank you again, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of If We Knew Then.